hosting. I very much appreciate it, and I understand those limitations when you're a federal government employee. But I will say, Greg, that you have at least 2 votes in the room here from your race.
Good.
And we were proud to support you.
Hopefully a few more.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you did. But you know, it's, you know, you both started this event off by talking about our democracy. That's what this is about. You know, when we voted for you, it was about that too. And then Sean Reyes proved us right when he tried to overturn the election, when he was a part of that effort as well, which was an absolute, another embarrassment and a shame for our state. You know, I'll maybe what I'll do is I'll start off just by sharing a little bit about me, since it's the first time I'm meeting many of you, so you know what my background is. And then I'd like to get to an update on the campaign. Greg provided a little bit of that just moments ago, but I'll provide a little more detail. And then let's get to a discussion. But you know, I was born in Utah County, born to a family like many families that struggled, especially in these days. You know, mom worked in public education, and this is before Costco, I believe. So she would buy bulk quantities of basic foodstuffs and then sell them out of our garage. My dad delivered papers in the morning and then worked at the local power company throughout the rest of the day. So we, you know, we never went hungry. It wasn't that bad, but at the end of the month, the food was gone, and we waited for parents to get paid again. And, you know, wore winter coats inside the house during the winter because we couldn't afford to turn on the heat. And we struggled that way, but still, my parents taught me to be grateful for what we did have, to work hard for what we didn't have, and to love our country and to be in service of others. So that was part of my upbringing. When I was a young guy, you know, 10 or 11 years old, my dad brought home a movie from Blockbuster. And now, you know, I think most of us in the room are old enough to remember that's how you watched movies at home at that time. And that's what we could afford to do. So on Fridays, when Dad came home from work, he would bring home a stack of movies from Blockbuster like that. Mom or Dad would cook popcorn in the special way we did it, with Kraft powdered cheese on top. I don't think they make those little cans of powdered cheese anymore, but they were sure popular in our house. But then we'd watch these films, and you know, one day my dad brought home a film called 3 Days of the Condor, this old Robert Redford spy film. Still one of the best spy films ever made, but also not at all accurate. But in my little 11-year-old brain, that was enough to trigger my interest in serving the country. And so I read every book I could get my hands on until I was age 15 about the CIA. And at age 15 reached out. Some of you heard this story. We can talk more about it some other time. But to make a long story short, the CIA gave me an offer to start training with them when I was a sophomore in college. And so for the rest of my college experience, I did a semester at school at Brigham Young University, a semester at CIA headquarters, and I went back and forth like that till I graduated. Soon after I graduated, the nation was attacked. It was 9/11. I was at CIA headquarters when that attack happened. And I'll never forget it. I was in the basement of the building doing a computer training class of all things. And a woman in a dress and sneakers poked her head into the room and said, "We are under attack. Get back to work." And so we all ran out of that basement classroom back up to our offices. I remember looking out the windows of our office, not onto a view like this, but nevertheless a view of trees from headquarters, from the trees that surround headquarters, and looking up at the television, seeing the Twin Towers. Not quite, they hadn't fallen yet, but they were smoking and it had been attacked. And then at some point thereafter, of course, the Pentagon was hit, and we evacuated CIA headquarters. I got into my car, drove home, and then within a couple of days, you know, I was assigned as a very young man to the Pentagon as one of the CIA representatives choosing targets in Afghanistan. I went, then finished my training. I went undercover, finished my training, and then deployed to that part of the world to run counterterrorism operations all over the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. Now, I tell you all of that because my experience, my service, had a tremendous impact on my politics in some really key ways. A tremendous impact on how I view America. One of those ways was that, we served in very dangerous circumstances, of course, as you can imagine, and we had to trust each other in order to get anything done. And our groups, our teams were comprised of people from all different walks of life. It was, people who, somebody like me, with my background, coming from here, from modest means. There were people who came from great means, people of one faith or another, people of different racial and religious backgrounds. There were people who weren't born in the United States. They were immigrants. They had come to America because they loved America. They wanted to be part of this. And they also wanted to contribute so much so that they were willing after 9/11 or even before it to stand up and help defend the country. So there we were together in these teams charged with tracking down and stopping terrorists who were trying to conduct the next 9/11 here or in other democracies in Europe and elsewhere. And never once during that time did I nudge the officer next to me and say, okay, before we do this, whatever we were about to do, before we do this operation, I've got to know, what party are you a member of? Or, who did you vote for in the last election? It never, ever happened. And for us, it never happened because for us it was enough to know that we were committed to American democracy. We were committed to the values enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, specifically that we're all created free. It's part of who we are as human beings, and that we're created equal. And that what that means is that we're of equal value and that we're equal under the law. And those things, those ideals, those truths, even that as I see them, require that we have a system of self-government in which we choose our leaders and our leaders are accountable to us. And that's the system of self-government we have here because of those ideals, because of those truths. It was enough for us that we were committed to those things. Nothing else mattered. We were willing to put our lives on the line for the country and for each other on those things alone. And we were effective because of that unity. Of course, there were still so many differences, but because we were united on those things, we were able to be effective and we were able to get things done for Americans, for America, for democracy writ large here and elsewhere around the world. So that was one very important thing. The other thing is that, actually related to that, we often hear from the far right, and some of you have heard this phrase, blood and soil, that's their idea of what should define America. That's another way of saying we should be defined by our race and where we're born. That's the idea of the far right, which is the opposite of what should define America. What should define America is our commitment to our values. That's what should define us, and it has. And we haven't been perfect as a nation, of course, but we need to be on, I believe, a journey towards a more perfect realization of those values in our country. So another thing, speaking of values, that I'll share with you, another experience from the agency. You've all seen the spy movies. Jason Bourne is running around some European capital in the middle of the night, and he's looking over his shoulder, trying to determine whether he's being followed before he goes and does some operation. My life was, I never looked as good as Jason Bourne, but it was similar to that in the sense that I was living in a country that was controlled by a dictatorial regime, and they had a nuclear program that we were concerned about, and I was living there and working there, and I had a cover job. During the day, I did one job so that I could be there, and at night I went out and ran operations. And one of the operations I was responsible for during that time was meeting with a senior military officer who loved his country and who loved America. And he was concerned that his country was controlled by an authoritarian regime. And although he was, very, very patriotic about his country, he wanted freedom for himself and for the rest of the people who lived there, but he also loved America. And so I headed out one night to meet this fellow. And before I could meet him, I had to determine that no one was following me. So I drove and walked and rode around the streets of this city for hours until I was sure that no one was with me. And when I felt safe, I went to the agreed upon place, a dark street, somewhat of an alley. And he was waiting for me. He jumped into my car and off we went together. And I had, 30 minutes to talk to him about our very important work. As soon as he got into the car, he was a very jovial guy, but as soon as he got into the car, I sensed that something was wrong. There was something not right. And I asked him, what's the matter? And he said, well, I've recently seen some troubling news. Now, many of you will remember the scandal, the Abu Ghraib scandal, where the U.S. government, was discovered to be mistreating Iraqi prisoners in our custody. You all recall that. Well, he had seen that news, and he said to me, if you're going, I've seen this news. If this is what America really is, I can't help you. I can't be a part of this. If this is what your country is really about, then I'm mistaken, and I can't help you. And I was deeply concerned because it was my job to continue this work, and we needed him in order to do it. Thankfully, I was able to talk him off the ledge, and we continued to do work together. But the point was that our values, our commitment to our values, has had I learned in that moment, such a direct, tangible impact on our strength as a country. That was a national security question. Had we lost him, and he decided not to work with us anymore, we would have lost, an important ability that we needed in order to protect ourselves. And so, that was an important early lesson from my life.